Welcome to Unlocking Passion. Men Report. Let's begin with a new story. Richard Thompson stood on the construction site that was supposed to become his dream resort and stared at nothing but overgrown weeds and a concrete foundation that led nowhere. The tropical sun beat mercilessly down on the abandoned property in Hua Hin, and the sound of the distant waves mocked him with its indifference. In his trembling hand, he held a stack of real estate documents that a Thai lawyer had just confirmed were worthless forgeries, professionally created fakes that had cost him $1.5 million, and everything he had worked for during 4 years of business. 3 months earlier, this empty piece of land had meant hope, partnership, and a second chance at happiness. Nareerat, Zornchai, the elegant woman he had planned to marry, had stood right here beside him, her hand in his, describing the boutique resort they would build together. She had painted vivid pictures of guest bungalows, nestled between palm trees, an infinity pool overlooking the Gulf of Thailand, and a fusion restaurant that would attract wealthy tourists from all over the world. She had called him her husband, even though they were not yet married. And he had believed that, after years of loneliness following his wife's death, he had finally found someone who saw him not only as a wealthy foreigner, but as a partner, a companion, a man who deserved love. Now, standing alone in the burning heat, with sweat soaking through his linen shirt, Rick understood the brutal truth. Nareerat had never loved him. The resort had never been real. Every tender moment, every whispered promise, every tear she had shed in his arms, all of it had been a carefully calculated performance designed to separate him from his money. And she had succeeded beyond anything he could have imagined. The retirement he had planned so carefully, the $2,300,000 he had earned by selling Zornchai, his car dealership chain in San Diego, the comfortable future he had imagined in a tropical paradise, all of it was gone. At 68 years old, Richard Thompson had been reduced from a millionaire to a man who barely had enough savings to survive another year. And the woman who had destroyed him had completely disappeared, leaving behind nothing but forged documents, unreachable phone numbers, and the crushing weight of his own foolishness. If you enjoy the stories I create, please consider pressing the subscribe button. Your support is essential for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to creating these videos, despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. Richard Thompson, known to everyone as Rick, had built his success through decades of hard work and unwavering dedication to customer service. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, he learned early that nothing in life came without effort. After working his way through community college, he secured a position at a Chevrolet dealership in San Diego at the age of 23. Rick discovered a natural talent for dealing with customers. Over 15 years, he worked his way up to general manager, saved aggressively, and in 1995, bought a struggling Ford dealership in El Cajon. The risk paid off spectacularly. He transformed the failing dealership into one of the most successful businesses in San Diego County, and eventually expanded to 3 dealerships across Southern California. By 2010, the Thompson Automotive Group was generating annual revenue of more than $50 million. Rick had married Linda at 22, and they raised 2 children, Michael and Jennifer. The family lived comfortably in La Jolla, with an ocean view, and they lacked nothing materially, but success protected no one from tragedy. Linda was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2012 and died in 2014, leaving Rick devastated. His adult children, Michael in finance in New York and Jennifer as a lawyer in Boston, called weekly and visited during holidays. But Rick could feel their discomfort in the face of his grief. By 2017, Rick sold the Thompson Automotive Group for $2,300,000. When he sat alone in his house in La Jolla on the night the sale was completed, the money felt meaningless. It could not bring Linda back or fill the silence that had become his constant companion. For 6 months, Rick tried traditional retirement, golf, volunteer work, and short attempts at dating, but nothing helped against his loneliness. In June 2018, a former employee sent him a postcard from Thailand. "Boss, you should see this place. It is paradise for people like us who want to slow down and enjoy life." 2 weeks later, Rick booked a 1-month trip to Thailand. His children were supportive, perhaps relieved that their father was finally doing something other than grieving. When Rick's plane landed at Suvarnabhumi Airport at the end of July 2018, he had no idea that he was about to meet the woman who would systematically destroy everything he had built over a lifetime. He believed he was simply taking a vacation. In reality, he was walking straight into the most sophisticated and devastating trap of his entire life. Hua Hin was not what Richard Thompson had expected. Unlike Bangkok's frantic energy or Phuket's saturation with tourists, this coastal city had a quiet elegance that appealed to him immediately. Rick rented a modest condominium near Khao Takia Beach and established a calm routine of beach walks, market breakfasts, and local restaurants. At a seafood restaurant recommended by his landlord, Rick met Zornchai, a well-dressed real estate developer who spoke excellent English. Their conversation was pleasant, and Zornchai invited Rick to a networking event the following evening, an international real estate group meeting at the Hilton. The event attracted perhaps 70 people, a mixture of Thais and foreigners, developers and property managers. Rick spoke with a British couple who's operated vacation rentals, a retired Australian contractor, and a Canadian hotel manager. During those conversations, Rick saw Nareerat Zornchai for the first time. She stood near the bar area, speaking with Zornchai and other Thai professionals. She wore a tasteful navy blue dress, her hair in a neat bun, with minimal jewelry. What struck Rick was not only her beauty, but her posture, a confidence that seemed different from other Thai women he had encountered. Rick did not approach her that evening. The atmosphere felt too professional. Toward the end of the event, Zornchai brought Nareerat over to introduce them. "Rick, this is Nareerat Zornchai, one of the best interior designers working on luxury properties in this area," Zornchai said. Nareerat, Richard Thompson, a retired businessman from California who is exploring Hua Hin. Nareerat extended her hand with a professional smile. Her handshake was firm, her English flawless. "San Diego area," she guessed correctly. Rick was impressed. "Yes, exactly. How did you know?" "Zornchai mentioned that you were in the automobile business. San Diego has a strong car culture. I was there once for a design conference." Beautiful city. They spoke for 10 minutes about her interior design work, his business background, and the differences between coastal life in California and Thailand. Nareerat was knowledgeable and articulate, discussing design trends and her vision of creating spaces that felt luxurious and yet authentically Thai. When the conversation ended, Nareerat handed Rick her business card. If you are interested in property in the area, or if you simply want to learn more about Hua Hin, feel free to contact me. I would be happy to show you around. Rick took the card and thanked her. He did not think much about it. It was a professional exchange, nothing more. But 3 days later, as he sat alone in his apartment scrolling through Thai real estate websites, Rick found himself thinking about Nareerat. Not romantically, he was not that naive, but he appreciated her professionalism and knowledge. And if he was seriously considering buying property in Thailand, he could do worse than having someone who understood the market. He sent her an email. "Hello, Nareerat. Rick Thompson here. We met at the real estate event at the Hilton. I will be here for another 2 weeks and would be interested in learning more about real estate opportunities in Hua Hin. Would you have time for a meeting?" She replied within 2 hours. "Hello, Rick. Of course I remember you. I would be happy to help. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? We could look at some interesting developments." The next day, Nareerat picked Rick up in a modest but clean Honda. She was dressed professionally, in a blouse and trousers, not the navy blue dress from the event. Her greeting was warm but businesslike. They spent 3 hours looking at different properties: condominiums near the beach, a small house in an expat community, and a development project that was not yet finished. Nareerat explained Thai property law, ownership restrictions for foreigners, and realistic price expectations. Rick was impressed by her knowledge and honesty. When they approached a particularly expensive condominium project, she shook her head. "These are for tourists who have the money but do not do the research. Overpriced for what they get. I am showing them to you so you understand the marketing tactics. But I would not recommend that you invest here." This honesty built trust. Rick had dealt with enough salespeople to know when someone was trying to sell him something. Nareerat seemed to genuinely want to help him make intelligent decisions. At the end of the day, they sat in a cafe overlooking the beach. Rick ordered coffee, Nareerat tea. The sun set over the Gulf of Thailand, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "What do you think of Hua Hin after your first visit?" Nareerat asked, sipping her tea. Rick thought for a moment. "It is different from what I expected. Quieter, less touristy than other places. I like that. Many people prefer it for exactly that reason," Nareerat said. "It is not Pattaya or Phuket. It is for people who want to experience the real Thailand, not the tourist version." "How did you get into interior design?" Rick asked, shifting the topic to her. Nareerat smiled. "I studied architecture in Bangkok, but I realized that what I truly loved was designing spaces where people could feel at home. I worked for different developers for 10 years before going independent. And is it going well? Well enough. Thailand is not easy for single business women. But I have built a reputation. People trust my work." They spoke for another hour about her career, his business history, and the differences between Thailand and America. The conversation was pleasant, without pressure. When she drove Rick back to his apartment, he offered to pay her for her time. Nareerat shook her head. "Today was a kindness. If you decide to buy property and need my professional help, then we can discuss fees." This generosity impressed Rick even more. He thanked her and said he would think about what she had shown him. During the next 10 days of Rick's original trip, they met 3 more times, twice to look at more properties, and once for dinner at a restaurant Nareerat had recommended. The relationship remained professional, but Rick found himself increasingly drawn to her company. She was intelligent, independent, and she seemed to respect him as a person, not only as a potential source of income. After years of feeling lonely in San Diego, Rick found it refreshing to speak with someone who seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts. As his departure date approached, Rick felt a hesitation he had not expected. He enjoyed Hua Hin. He enjoyed the conversations with Nareerat. For the first time since Linda's death, something felt almost like purpose. On the evening before his scheduled return flight, Rick and Nareerat met one last time for dinner. During the meal, Rick felt a melancholy that surprised him. "I have really enjoyed my time here," Rick said honestly. "More than I expected." "I am glad," Nareerat said. "Hua Hin has a positive effect on some people. Perhaps you will come back." "Perhaps," Rick said. He hesitated and then added, "I have also enjoyed spending time with you. You helped me understand that there is more here than just beach vacations." Nareerat smiled gently. "That is kind of you to say. I have enjoyed our conversations too. You are different from many foreigners who come here. Respectful, attentive." The conversation could have ended there, a nice exchange between new acquaintances. But when the dinner ended and they stood outside, looking out at the dark street, Nareerat said something that changed everything. "Rick, if you ever decide to come to Hua Hin more permanently, I would be happy to see you again. As a friend, I mean, not only professionally." Rick felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he had not felt in years. "I would like that too," he said quietly. They hugged briefly, a platonic goodbye. And then Nareerat was gone, leaving Rick alone on the street, his thoughts swirling with possibilities he had not dared to hope for. The next morning, as Rick sat on the plane flying back to San Diego, he did not think about the properties he had seen or the beaches he had enjoyed. He thought about Nareerat, her intelligence, her warmth, the way she treated him like an equal human being, not like a lonely old man. For the first time since Linda's death, Richard Thompson allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, a second chance at companionship might be possible in his life. He had absolutely no idea that this hope would become the precise weapon Nareerat Zornchai would use to destroy him completely. When Rick returned to San Diego, he found his empty La Jolla villa unbearable. After a month in Hua Hin's warmth and community, California felt cold and isolating. His children called as usual, Michael from New York and Jennifer from Boston, but their conversations felt dutiful, not connected. Rick began corresponding with Nareerat by email. At first, their exchanges were casual. He told her about his jet lag. She shared photos of design projects she was working on. But gradually, the correspondence deepened. Nareerat asked thoughtful questions about Rick's life. She asked about his late wife, not in a morbid or invasive way, but with genuine curiosity about who Linda had been and what their marriage had meant. "You must have loved her very much," Nareerat wrote after an email exchange in which Rick had shared something about Linda's battle with cancer. "It must be difficult to imagine being with someone else." Rick's reply was more honest than he had intended. "It is not so much that I cannot imagine being with someone else. It is more that I have never met anyone who sees me the way Linda did, as a complete person, not just as a successful businessman or a source of money. Nareerat's response came quickly. I understand that. People often reduce us to categories. Successful businessman, single career woman. They do not see who we really are as people. These conversations built intimacy. Rick found himself sharing things with Nareerat that he had not shared with anyone in years. His fears of growing old, his regrets over business decisions, his complicated relationship with his children, who loved him but did not really seem to understand him. Nareerat never only listened. She also shared. She told him about her own difficult past, a failed marriage to a Thai businessman who had cheated on her and financially exploited her, her struggle to build credibility in a male-dominated industry, and her loneliness as a successful but unmarried woman in her late 30s, in a culture that valued marriage. Sometimes I think I will never find someone who understands me, she wrote in one email. Thai men want a traditional woman who gives up her career. Foreigners see me as an exotic trophy. No one sees just me. This vulnerability touched Rick deeply. He began thinking about returning to Thailand, not just for a vacation, but to see whether the connection he felt with Nareerat was real. In October, 3 months after his first trip, Rick flew back to Hua Hin. This time he stayed for 2 months and rented a more comfortable apartment near Nareerat's office. Their relationship developed naturally. They spent a great deal of time together. Dinners, walks on the beach, visits to local temples and markets. Nareerat introduced him to her friends, Thai professionals who spoke good English and treated Rick with respect. Rick was careful not to make assumptions. He did not flirt aggressively. He did not make inappropriate advances. He wanted to be sure that whatever was developing between them was real, not just the fantasy of a lonely man. But one evening in November, during a walk on the beach after dinner, Nareerat stopped and looked directly at Rick. Rick, I have to tell you something. His heart sped up. What is it? I enjoy spending time with you very much, but I am worried that you may have expectations I do not know about. Rick felt panic rising. Nareerat, I have no expectations. I simply enjoy your company. If that is all it ever becomes, I am fine with that. She shook her head. That is not what I mean. I mean, Rick, I am developing feelings for you. Real feelings. But I am afraid. What are you afraid of? The age difference. You are 68. I am 39. People will judge. They will think I am with you because of your money. Rick felt something more hopeful than he had felt in years. Do you care what people think? I care what you think, Nareerat said quietly. I want you to know that if we explore this, I am doing it because I value you as a person, not because of your financial situation. I believe you, Rick said, and he meant it. And I am developing feelings for you too. I did not want to presume, but yes, I feel something real. They kissed for the first time on that beach, a gentle, careful kiss that felt both thrilling and strangely appropriate. In the following weeks, their relationship deepened. They became openly romantic, but Rick was careful to respect proper boundaries. Nareerat did not sleep with him immediately. She said she wanted to be sure this was right for both of them, not just a temporary connection. This patience convinced Rick even more of her sincerity. In his experience, women who were only interested in money were not reserved about physical intimacy. They used sex as a tool of manipulation. Nareerat's hesitation seemed like genuine respect, not calculation. In December, shortly before Rick was supposed to return to California, they spoke about the future. "I do not want this to end," Rick said honestly. "But I do not know how we can make it work." "You could move here," Nareerat said carefully. "Permanently, I mean. You are retired. You have no obligations in America keeping you there." Rick had considered this possibility, but he had hesitated to suggest it. "Would you want me to move here?" "I know it is a big decision," Nareerat said, "and I do not want to pressure you, but yes, I would like to see where this could lead if we were in the same city." Rick spent the Christmas holidays in San Diego, seriously thinking about the move. His children were surprised, but not opposed. They noticed that their father seemed happier in Thailand than he had been since Linda's death. "Are you sure this is not just, I do not know, a rebound or something?" Jennifer asked during a Skype call. "I am 68 years old," Rick said. "I do not have time for rebounds. Nareerat is real. She is intelligent, independent, and she treats me with respect. That is more than I ever hope to find again." Michael was more pragmatic. "Just be careful with your finances, Dad. Thailand has complicated property laws. Make sure you understand what you are getting into before you make any major financial commitments." Rick appreciated his children's concern, but he felt confident. He had spent decades making successful business decisions. He understood due diligence and research. He would be foolish if he rushed into anything. In January 2019, Rick returned to Hua Hin, this time with the intention of staying permanently. He rented a nice apartment near the beach and began the process of understanding Thai banks, residence visas, and property laws. Nareerat was helpful at every step. She introduced him to lawyers, helped him navigate Thai bureaucracy, and accompanied him to bank meetings. Her professionalism was reassuring. She never pushed him toward quick decisions or rushed investments. Their romantic relationship also deepened. In February, they became intimate, and Rick found an emotional connection that went beyond physical attraction. Nareerat was attentive, loving, and she seemed to truly appreciate Rick, not only as a source of money, but as a partner. In March 2019, they spoke seriously about marriage for the first time. "Rick, I need to tell you something," Nareerat began one evening after dinner. "I do not love you because of your money or your status. I love you because you are kind, respectful, because you treat me as an equal." Rick felt emotions rising that he thought he would never feel again after Linda's death. "I love you too, Nareerat. You have given my life meaning again." She hesitated and then said, "I want us to build a future together, a real future. But I worry that people will think I am only interested in your money." "Let them think what they want," Rick said. "I know what is real between us. There is a way we could show everyone that this is real," Nareerat said slowly. "We could invest in something together. A business, a project, something that shows we are partners. Not just, this was the moment when Nareerat's plan truly began. But Rick did not see it as manipulation. He saw it as a solution to a legitimate problem. "What would you have in mind?" Rick asked. Nareerat smiled, that perfect, trustworthy smile she had perfected. "Let me think about it. It has to be something that makes sense for both of us, something real." What Rick did not understand was that nothing Nareerat said was real. The love was not real. The worries about what people would think were not real. Even her name might not have been real. But Rick believed. He believed because he wanted to believe. And that belief was the precise tool Nareerat would use to destroy, with surgical precision, everything Richard Thompson owned. In April 2019, Nareerat took Rick to an empty plot of land in an upscale neighborhood of Hua Hin, about 3 kilometers from the beach. The property was 1,200 square meters, slightly hilly, with a distant view of the Gulf of Thailand. "This is perfect," Nareerat said, gesturing across the land. "Large enough for a boutique resort, maybe 6 or 8 bungalows, a main building with a restaurant and pool. Not too big, not too small." Rick saw the potential immediately. His years of business experience told him the location was good, an upscale area, but not as overcrowded with tourists as the beaches closer to the city center. "How much would something like this cost?" Rick asked carefully. Nareerat pulled a folder from her bag. "I have done research. The land is owned by an older Thai family that wants to sell. They are asking $600,000. Construction costs for a properly built boutique resort. High-quality materials, professional design, would probably be another $700,000. Altogether, about $1.3 million. Rick felt a chill of concern. That was more than half of all his liquid assets. "That is a lot of money." "It is," Nareerat agreed. "And I would never suggest that you do something like this alone. But Rick, think about it as a partnership. I would manage all the design, construction supervision, and operations after opening. You would bring the financial expertise. We would build a real business together. How much would you contribute?" Rick asked, a fair business question. Nareerat did not hesitate. "I have $200,000 in savings. Not nearly as much as you. But everything I have built over 10 years, I would invest all of it, plus my professional reputation and my time." Rick appreciated this honesty. She was not making a ridiculous claim that she could contribute equally. She acknowledged the financial imbalance and offered what she could. "Let me think about it," Rick said. Over the next 2 weeks, Rick researched thoroughly. He visited boutique resorts in Hua Hin and spoke with owners about occupancy rates, operating costs, and profitability. The numbers were promising. Well-run small resorts could become profitable after 5 to 7 years. He consulted with an independent Thai lawyer, but he found through expat forums. The lawyer explained Thai property law. Foreigners could not directly own land, but they could be part of corporate structures that owned land. "The standard approach is a Thai limited company," the lawyer explained. "You would own 49%. Thai partners would own 51%. Legally, Thai shareholders must have the majority. Is that safe?" Rick asked. The lawyer shrugged. "It is the standard structure. There are risks, certainly. Your Thai partners could theoretically use their majority to push you out. That is why you must work with people you trust and have proper contracts." Rick trusted Nareerat. She had spent months proving her sincerity. She had never asked for money. She had wanted to invest her own savings. That did not seem like a fraudster. That seemed like a real partner. At the end of April, Rick told Nareerat that he was ready to move forward. They both cried. Nareerat from supposed joy, Rick from relief at finally having a real connection with someone. "We should do this properly," Nareerat said through tears of joy. Let us get married before we start the business. I want everyone to know that we are not only business partners, we are family, Rick agreed. In May 2019, in a small ceremony attended by only a few of Nareerat's friends, they got married. Rick's children could not come. Michael had business obligations. Jennifer was pregnant with her second child. But they congratulated him by video call. The wedding felt real. Nareerat cried, which Rick interpreted as genuine emotion. They exchanged rings. They spent a wedding night at a luxury resort in Phuket. Rick felt whole for the first time in years. He had a purpose, a partner, a future. He had absolutely no idea that every single part of what he was experiencing had been carefully choreographed by a woman whose only goal was to financially gut him and then leave him without a cent. In June, the real estate transactions began. Nareerat introduced Rick to a lawyer. A friend, she said, someone who was fair and understood the interests of foreigners. The lawyer, Zornchai, was the same person Rick had met at the real estate event months earlier. I will make sure everything is legally structured, Zornchai assured him. The Thai Limited Company will protect you, and all documents will be properly registered. Rick transferred $800,000 into the business account Zornchai Sheed had set up, $600,000 for the land and $200,000 for initial construction costs. Nareerat supposedly transferred her $200,000 into the same account. The land purchase moved quickly. Within 3 weeks, the newly created Resort Development Company Limited officially owned the property in Hua Hin. Rick's name appeared on documents as a 44% shareholder. Nareerat's name appeared as a 36% shareholder. 3 other Thai names, friends of Nareerat, she explained, made up the remaining 20% to satisfy legal requirements. These people are only nominee shareholders, Zornchai explained. They are required to make the company legal, but they have no real control. The operating agreements give you and Nareerat the actual decision-making authority. Rick believed this because all the documents looked professional and because both Zornchai and Nareerat constantly assured him that everything was transparent and legal. In July, construction began. Nareerat introduced a contractor, another trusted friend. The contractor presented detailed plans for the resort, 6 luxury bungalows, 6 each, with its own bathroom and terrace, a central main building with a restaurant and reception area, and an infinity pool overlooking the hills toward the sea. Rick visited the construction site weekly. Workers poured foundations, erected scaffolding, and delivered materials. Everything seemed to be moving forward legitimately. What Rick did not know was that the construction workers were mostly actors who appeared for a few hours whenever Rick had scheduled visits. The real foundation was poured. That was necessary to maintain the illusion. But beyond that, no real construction was taking place. By September, Rick had transferred another $400,000 in construction costs. Nareerat showed him invoices, delivery receipts, and payroll lists. Everything looked legitimate. In October, when Rick visited the site, he noticed that progress seemed slower than expected. The contractor explained that rainy season storms had delayed the work and that material deliveries from Bangkok were slow because of transport problems. That is normal in Thailand, Nareerat assured him. Construction here is never on schedule, but the quality is good. We are not rushing, Rick accepted this. He had no experience with Thai construction projects. He trusted Nareerat's expertise. What Rick did not realize was that the entire project was an elaborate facade. The land existed, the foundation existed, but the ownership documents Rick had signed were forgeries. The Thai Limited Company was a shell company. The friends acting as nominee shareholders were actually people paid by Nareerat to put their names on fraudulent documents. Every single dollar Rick invested did not go into construction. It went directly into bank accounts, controlled by Nareerat and her network. And Rick, full of hope and trust, believing he was building a future with the woman he loved, saw nothing of the deception until it was far, far too late. By November 2019, Rick had invested a total of $1.2 million into the resort project. His bank account, which had once held $2.3 million, had now shrunk to about $1.1 million. He was worried about the rate at which he was spending money, but Nareerat constantly assured him this was normal for development projects. "The biggest costs come at the beginning," she explained. "Once the infrastructure is finished, costs will fall significantly, and once we open, revenue will begin to come in." Rick visited the construction site, and it looked as though progress was being made. Walls were going up. Roofs were being framed. What he did not know was that these improvements were often temporary structures erected shortly before his visits and removed afterward. Rick's emotional dependence on Nareerat deepened during this time. She was not only his business partner. She was his companion, his confidant, the person who made him feel that his life had meaning again after Linda's death. They were physically intimate, but Nareerat always controlled the rhythm of their relationship. Some weeks she was affectionate and attentive. Other weeks she was distant and busy with work. This inconsistency kept Rick emotionally unbalanced, constantly trying to regain her approval when she withdrew. It is a classic manipulation pattern known as intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable rewards that create powerful emotional dependence. But Rick did not recognize it as manipulation. He interpreted Nareerat's distance as legitimate stress from managing the project. In December, they spoke for the first time about additional financing. "Rick, we have a problem," Nareerat said one evening, her voice full of concern. "The contractor says material costs have increased significantly." The original estimates were too low. Rick felt alarm. "How much more do we need?" "Another 200,000, maybe 300,000, Nareerat said. "I know that is a lot, but if we stop now, we lose everything we have invested. The project will be unfinished. We cannot sell it. We cannot operate it." This is another classic fraud tactic, the sunk cost trap. Once the victim has invested significantly, additional funding is presented as necessary to protect the initial investment. Rick was torn. He had already invested more than half of his fortune. Investing another $300,000 would bring him to $1.5 million from his original $2.3 million, leaving him with only $800,000 in liquid assets. "I need to think about it," Rick said. Nareerat's response was perfectly calibrated, not angry, but disappointed. "I understand. It is your money. I am investing everything I have, but I cannot force you to invest if you do not believe this project will work." That statement made Rick feel guilty. Nareerat had supposedly invested everything: her savings, her time, her professional reputation. If Rick backed out now, he would be abandoning her. Over the Christmas holidays, Rick discussed the dilemma with his children by video call. "Dad, this does not sound right," Jennifer said directly. "You have gone from 2.3 million to potentially 800,000 in less than a year. That is not normal for a small resort project." Michael was more pragmatic. "Have you independently confirmed the costs? Have you asked other contractors for quotes? Have you had all the ownership documents checked by a lawyer Nareerat did not introduce to you?" These were fair questions. But Rick was defensive. "You do not understand how business works in Thailand. It is different from America. Nareerat knows what she is doing." "Dad, we are just worried," Jennifer said. "You met this woman only a year ago. You have been married to her for 6 months, and now she is asking you to invest almost your entire fortune into something you cannot fully verify." But Rick did not listen. He felt misunderstood by his children, who did not appreciate Nareerat, the situation, or the cultural differences that made international business complicated. In January 2020, Rick agreed to invest another $300,000. His bank account now fell to $800,000. What Rick did not know was that Nareerat and her accomplices were already preparing to disappear. They had received $1.5 million from him, more than enough for their purposes. The plan now was to let him invest the last few $100,000 and then vanish completely. In February, things began to change subtly. Nareerat became increasingly busy with work. She no longer answered calls immediately. When they met, she seemed distracted. Rick interpreted this as stress from managing the project, not as preparation for disappearance. "Is everything all right?" Rick asked after one particularly distant dinner. "I am just tired," Nareerat said. "The project is stressful, and I am worried that we are short on cash." "Do you need more money?" Rick asked. Exactly the question she had been waiting for. "Maybe another 100,000, Nareerat said hesitantly. "Only to make sure we have enough buffer for unexpected costs." Rick hesitated. Investing another $100,000 would leave him with only $700,000, less than 1/3 of his original fortune. "Let me see what I can do," Rick said. But before Rick could make that additional investment, something happened that changed everything. In March 2020, when Rick visited the construction site for a routine inspection, he found it completely abandoned. No workers, no equipment, only the half-finished foundation and some structures abandoned at various stages of construction. Rick immediately called Nareerat. She did not answer. He called the contractor. The number was no longer in service. He called Zornchai, the lawyer. That number was also no longer in service. Panic gripped Rick's chest. He drove to Nareerat's office. It was locked, the sign removed. He went to her apartment. The landlord said she had moved out a week earlier, without notice or forwarding address. Rick became almost hysterical. He went to the police station in Hua Hin and tried to file a fraud report. The police officer was not helpful. "What is your legal status with this property?" the officer asked. Rick showed him the documents he had: the company formation papers, the ownership documents, the contracts. The officer flipped through them. His expressionless face became increasingly skeptical. "These documents, I am not sure they are legal. You need to have them checked by a proper lawyer." Rick found an independent lawyer, one who specialized in fraud cases. The news was devastating. "Mr. Thompson, these documents are forgeries," the lawyer said clearly. "The registration stamps are not real. The signatures on the ownership documents do not match Thai government records. The Thai limited company you believe you own was never legally registered." Rick felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. "What does that mean?" "It means that legally, you own no interest in this land," the lawyer said. "The actual legal ownership of this land belongs to a Thai family that probably has no idea its property was used in a fraud scheme. Every dollar you invested is gone." Rick could not breathe. "Can I pursue her legally? Can I get my money back?" The lawyer sighed. "You can try, but Miss Zornchai, if that is even her real name, has disappeared. She has probably left the country. And even if you find her, it would be extraordinarily difficult to prove she committed fraud if she can claim you willingly invested money in a business venture that simply failed." Rick left the lawyer's office in a state of shock. He had lost $1.5 million, more than half of his entire fortune. The woman he loved, or thought he loved, had systematically destroyed him. The next weeks were a downward spiral. Rick could not sleep. He could barely eat. He sat in his apartment looking at photos of himself and Nareerat together, trying to understand how he could have been so completely deceived. He searched the internet for information about her. He found nothing. No social media profiles, no business records, nothing. It was as if Nareerat Zornchai had never existed. In reality, she did not exist under that name. She was a professional fraudster, operating under multiple identities, targeting wealthy, lonely foreign men, and carrying out complex long-term scams that lasted months or years. Rick's financial situation was now desperate. He had $700,000 left, less than 1/3 of his original assets. His monthly expenses in Thailand were around several $1,000s. He might have 20 years of life expectancy ahead of him. Simple mathematics showed that he did not have enough money to survive comfortably. He would have to drastically reduce his expenses or return to America and rely on Social Security and help from his children, a humiliating outcome for a man who had once run a successful multi-million-dollar company. But the financial devastation was not the worst part of Rick's destruction. The worst part was the emotional destruction. Rick had believed that Nareerat loved him. He had believed that he had found a partner who valued him for himself, not for his money. He had believed that his life had meaning again after Linda's death. All of those beliefs were lies. Nareerat had never loved him. She had studied him, identified his vulnerabilities, and exploited him with precise calculation. Every tear she had shed had been artificial. Every moment of intimacy had been acting. Every time she had said, "I love you," it had been a lie. Rick had not only lost money. He had lost his faith in human decency. He had lost his belief that anyone could ever love him for who he was. In April 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic spread and international travel shut down, Rick sat alone in his apartment in Hua Hin and realized that he was trapped in Thailand with dwindling money and no way to return home. He had not yet reached rock bottom, but he was getting there quickly. The COVID-19 pandemic turned Rick's desperate situation into an absolute catastrophe. When the Thai government first restricted international flights in March 2020, Rick was effectively trapped in Hua Hin. His financial situation deteriorated rapidly. The apartment he had rented, a comfortable two-bedroom unit near the beach, cost thousands of dollars per month. When he realized that he might be stuck in Thailand for months or longer, Rick had to reduce his expenses drastically. He moved into a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable part of town. The unit was barely 250 square feet, with a single bed, a small kitchen, and a tiny bathroom. The air conditioning worked poorly. There were cockroaches. Rick's monthly expenses, rent, food, utilities, and medication, dropped to about $800. But even at this reduced rate, he could see his bank account steadily shrinking. He continued trying to find Nareerat. He hired a second lawyer who, for an upfront fee, promised to track her down. After 2 months, the lawyer had found nothing. Rick's bank account was now at $640,000. The emotional burden began to manifest physically. Rick had enjoyed good health throughout his life, but now he developed several stress-related conditions. His blood pressure rose dangerously. He developed an irregular heartbeat. He could not sleep, lying awake night after night, replaying every moment with Nareerat in his head, trying to identify when he should have realized that she was manipulating him. By May, Rick had become clinically depressed. He rarely left his apartment. He stopped taking proper care of himself. His children tried to reach him through video calls, but Rick could barely speak to them without breaking down. "Dad, you have to get out of Thailand," Michael urged. "I will book a flight as soon as flights resume. You can stay with us. We will help you reorganize." But Rick was too ashamed. He could not imagine returning to his successful children and admitting that he had been completely exploited by a fraudster. Rick developed type 2 diabetes, probably triggered by the combination of stress, poor diet, and lack of movement. Thai doctors prescribed medication, but healthcare costs added another $200 to his monthly expenses. His bank account continued to fall. In July 2020, something happened that briefly gave Rick hope, but it turned into yet another catastrophe. He received an email that appeared to come from a Thai lawyer specializing in recovering funds from romance scams. The lawyer wrote that he had successfully represented 3 previous victims of Nareerat Zornchai and was confident he could recover significant portions of Rick's stolen money. The fees were substantial, an upfront payment plus 30% of recovered funds. But if the lawyer could truly recover a significant part of Rick's $1.5 million, the cost would be justified. Rick should have been more suspicious, but desperation had completely destroyed his judgment. He withdrew a large amount from his remaining savings and transferred it to the lawyer's account. The lawyer provided updates for 3 weeks. He had located assets, filed legal claims, and was negotiating with banks. Then, suddenly, the lawyer stopped responding. The website disappeared. The phone number was disconnected. Rick realized that he had been scammed again, this time by someone specifically targeting previous fraud victims, knowing they were vulnerable and desperate for recovery. The secondary victimization represented a psychological devastation that Rick simply could not process. His remaining savings, just were now only a small fraction of the wealth he had arrived with. As the COVID-19 pandemic continued to restrict international travel, Rick finally accepted that he had no choice but to leave Thailand. He could not stay indefinitely, with his savings nearly exhausted and his health failing. Michael bought him a ticket, but the flight was cancelled due to pandemic restrictions. Rick was trapped for 5 months, surviving on very little money each month. His health continued to deteriorate. Finally, in June 2020, Rick secured a seat on a repatriation flight organized by the U.S. Embassy. He arrived in San Diego with very little money left, chronic health conditions, and no home. He had sold his California house the previous year. Michael and Jennifer arranged for their father to stay temporarily with Michael's family while they helped him rebuild minimal financial stability. Rick applied for Social Security. His monthly payment was barely enough to cover basic expenses. By the end of 2020, Rick had moved into a subsidized senior housing complex. His unit was 400 square feet and furnished with donated items. He had no car and relied on public transportation. His relationship with his children had improved slightly, but the damage remained. They helped with expenses when they could, but Rick could feel their discomfort. Their successful father had been reduced to an almost impoverished senior living on charity. Rick's physical health stabilized with better medical access, but the emotional damage remained profound. He struggled with depression, sleeping only a few hours each night, tormented by memories of Nareerat. Later, Rick learned that Nareerat, or someone matching her description, had been arrested under another name in Malaysia, but was released after 3 days because of insufficient evidence. She disappeared again, presumably continuing her criminal career somewhere in Southeast Asia. Richard Thompson is now 73 years old. He still lives in the subsidized senior apartment in San Diego. He survives on his Social Security payment and occasional financial help from Michael and Jennifer. His health remains fragile. He takes daily medication for diabetes, high blood pressure, and depression. His savings, once more than $2 million, are completely depleted. He has no assets, no property, no financial security beyond his government benefits. He no longer travels. He cannot afford vacations, restaurants, or any of the leisure activities he had imagined for his retirement. His daily routine consists of walks in his neighborhood, volunteer work at a local food bank, and watching television in his small apartment. He has few friends. Most people from his successful business years have drifted away, one uncomfortable with his reduced circumstances and the embarrassing story of how he lost everything. Rick occasionally speaks at programs organized by senior advocacy groups, warning other older adults about romance scams and the dangers of international investment fraud. He has reluctantly become the cautionary tale he never imagined he would be. The successful businessman, destroyed by loneliness and manipulation. The wealthy man, reduced to poverty because he trusted the wrong person. His children visit him regularly and have urged him to write about his experience, perhaps to find meaning in his suffering by helping others avoid similar mistakes. But Rick finds it too painful to revisit the details of how thoroughly Nareerat deceived him, how completely he ignored warning signs that now seem blindingly obvious. I came to Thailand as a millionaire. Rick tells the few people who are willing to listen to his story. I believed I was smart enough, experienced enough, careful enough to protect myself from fraud. I had successfully run a $50 million business for decades. I thought I understood people and could recognize manipulation when I saw it. He pauses, his voice becoming quiet and hollow. But none of that matters. She was better at deceiving than I was at recognizing deception. She studied me, understood my vulnerabilities, and played me perfectly. And I walked willingly, gratefully, into the trap, because I so desperately wanted to believe that someone could love me, that my life could have meaning again after my wife died. Rick Thompson now understands that his destruction was not the result of one bad decision, but of a cascading series of decisions driven by emotional needs that overwhelmed his judgment. His loneliness after Linda's death made him vulnerable. His distance from his children left him isolated and searching for connection. His wealth made him an attractive target, and his desperate desire for purpose and partnership made him willing to ignore warning signs that should have been immediately obvious. Nareerat Zornchai, or whatever her real name may be, has never been arrested or charged for defrauding Rick Thompson. She has never returned a single dollar of the $1.5 million she stole from him. She has never faced consequences for destroying his retirement, his security, and his future. She is presumably still operating somewhere in Southeast Asia, identifying new targets, cultivating new relationships, and carrying out the same sophisticated fraud that proved so devastatingly effective against lonely, wealthy men who mistake calculated manipulation for genuine affection. And Rick Thompson, who once had everything a man could want, now has almost nothing except regret, shame, and the bitter awareness that he will spend the rest of his life paying for the months when he mistook a beautiful lie for the truth he had desperately been searching for. His is not a story with a happy ending or moral redemption. It is simply the truth about what happens when loneliness meets sophisticated manipulation, when hope overwhelms caution, and when a successful life built over decades can be destroyed in months by someone who understands exactly how to exploit human vulnerability for profit. Rick Thompson came to Thailand searching for paradise. Instead, he found a trap that cost him everything: his money, his dignity, his future, and perhaps most devastatingly, his belief that the world contains people who could love him for who he was instead of what he had. If this story touched you, or if you know someone who could benefit from hearing it, please consider subscribing to this channel. These stories matter. These warnings matter. And the more people understand how sophisticated romance fraud has become, the fewer victims will suffer the devastating losses that destroyed Richard Thompson's life. Thank you for watching. And please be careful out there.